right, welcome back to another episode of Pirkei Avos, live from Israel, the Ethics of the Fathers with Rabbi Chaim Coffman. Always good to be with Rabbi Coffman, sharing the Torah, always more and more. I think we're still continuing with chapter 2, Mishnah 5. He may get into 6 today. I'm not sure. It's always a good time to be with him, and it's always exciting. He always makes it very interesting. So let's just jump right in and see how the rabbi's doing today. Rabbi Coffman, good day to you. I know it's getting on there in the evening. It's bright and sunny morning here for me. So, have at her, sir.
We are doing great. We won't mention how I just busted your chops for the last 20 minutes. We'll keep that. We'll keep that to ourselves. Had an unbelievable week here. It was nice and warm. Then all of a sudden, overnight, got cold, got snow. First time in 5 years. Shuts down Israel and with a centimeter of snow. But we still had enough snow to make have a nice snowball fight. Have some make a snowman. It was nice and cold, but now we're on the mend, getting warmer. But always exciting to have a little bit of snow here, because even if they think of snow, they shut everything down because people can't drive in the rain. They certainly can't drive in the snow, right? That is no question. We don't have snow tires, right? Nobody has snow tires here because it doesn't really snow that often, and all the snow plows are like dump trucks, so they're like kind of.
I got nice ice tires.
Yeah, exactly.
All-wheel drive here.
It's kind of funny to watch. Anyway, we are still in chapter 2, Mishnah 5. We are not going to get to Mishnah 6. I definitely don't foresee that. Maybe in the next few weeks. That's why I always say it's going to take us the next millennium to finish over here. One thing I do want to mention actually before we get started, just I guess his introduction, which has really nothing to do with the Mishnah, right? But we read today, since it's a week before Purim, so we're gonna next Friday for everybody, they're gonna read the Megillah, we're gonna read the Book of Esther. There will be food gifts that are given. They're gifts to the poor, right? Giving charity, etc. In Jerusalem, they'll have their festive meal on Sunday because they usually do it the next day, and the next day happens to be on Shabbos, so they're not going to do it on Shabbos. So yeah, Friday's going to be an interesting day because you have to have this festive meal, and people drink, and it goes into Shabbos. So hopefully there'll be something left of me after Shabbos. One thing I didn't want to mention that I sort of muffed last week, and what I was thinking of was that if you take Bilam and Balak, right? Remember in Parshas Balak, that in the book of Numbers, Bilam, the evil non-Jewish prophet, wants to curse the Jewish people, right? Tries to curse this way, that way, the other way. God puts words in his mouth. He ends up praising the Jewish people. Balak is willing to pay him millions of dollars just to curse the Jewish people. In the end, they failed, but Bilam still got 24,000 people to sin with these with the women of Midian. And what I meant to say was, if you take the words Bilam and Balak, right, the end of the word of Bilam, right? Bilam is Bet Lamed Ayin Mem, right? Ayin Mem, and Balak, the last two words are Balak is Bet Lamed Kuf, right? So the last two letters of Balak, you got a Lamed and a Kuf. In the last two letters of Bilam, you have an Aleph and a Mem, or an Ayin and a Mem, right? I think it's an Aleph, actually, not an Ayin. But in any case, the mixture of Bilam and Balak together, Aleph, Mem, Lamed, Kuf, is Amalek, right? So you have a combination. You have a combination of Bilam and Balak, right? Together they can represent what Amalek is, right? Amalek, absolute cruelty, right? We see the end of Parshas Kitetse, the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 23, verses 17 and 19, speaks about Amalek, which we read today, what we call Parshas Zachor, the remembrance of Amalek, even though we don't know who Amalek is today. But what does the verse say over there? They prey on the weak, right? They prey on the weak. They think there's no such thing as supernatural. So what do? They brought in doubt to the world, right? They brought in doubt to the world. If you take each letter of the word Amalek, right, and each letter has a numeric value, right? Aleph is 1, Mem is 40, right? So you do the math, it's got the same mathematical number as suffix, as doubt, right? That's what they brought into the world. Not only that, they brought unbelievable cruelty, as well, by preying on people that are, that are weak, that can't defend themselves, and all that. So we mentioned that by Germany during the war. So many rabbinical authorities hold Germany was Amalek, just the sheer, cruelty of the fact that they took on people who couldn't defend themselves, starved them to death. They certainly couldn't defend themselves, right? And anyway, we mentioned this. I think we mentioned this last week, but in general, you take that negative combination, right, of Bilam and Balak together coming against the Jewish people, and what do you end up with? You end up with Amalek, right? That's what I wanted to bring down last week, but I sort of muffed it up. So just wanted to clarify that. Also shows I'm human, right? So now back to our.
Not you.
No, God forbid. Anyone should, I can walk on water. I just don't show it in public, right? I don't want to show off everything, that I can do. We'll keep everybody a little bit in suspense.
Well, we all have to stay humble, don't we?
Exactly. I mean, you've never seen me do a 100-yard dash in like 4.3 seconds, especially when I'm on steroids. So obviously you've never seen that either, but we're not going to go that far. Says the Mishnah, second part of the Mishnah. See, it took 4 times, 8 hours to get through 2 parts of the Mishnah. Right? Don't separate yourself from the community. Don't believe in yourself until the day you die. It took 4 episodes. 4 episodes. You didn't even interrupt that much. Right? So now, what's the 5th part here? And I don't know how much farther we're going to get with this. Right? But the 5th part of the 3rd part of the Mishnah here is, do not judge your fellow until you've reached this place. Now, this is a major thing over here. Right? Because if we see someone do something wrong, right? We see somebody has a trial, someone has a tribulation, they go through something difficult, whatever it may be, a person should never judge them too harshly until you yourself have gone through it and you yourself was saved. Now, we see somebody going through something. We don't know all the factors involved.
Right.
In general.
Never do.
And a lot of times we don't even know what people go through in general, right? We're not necessarily privy to that information. Not everyone's going to wear their, wear what's going on in their lives on their sleeve, right? Probably a lot of people not like that, right? Regardless, if we know someone's going through a certain trial and a certain tribulation, right? Now, we cannot fathom what a person's going through and all the other factors involved. So therefore, we don't have the ability to judge, right? In other words, if you've gone through the same thing, you, God forbid, have gone through the same thing. If you've gone through the same thing, that's one thing, right? But even if you've gone through the same thing, doesn't mean all the factors are the same, right? But if you have gone through the same thing, you could relate. Right? You can certainly relate to what someone else has gone through. If you haven't gone through it, right? So you can empathize. You can certainly empathize, but you can't judge. You're not allowed to judge. Now, this opens up a whole can of worms, and I think I'll open up another whole can of worms, and that is because we don't shy away from controversy, right? As you know, people are going to say, who are you to judge? Who the heck are you to judge? I've gotten this a number of times, right? Especially from family, because I know no family member of mine is going to be watching this, right? Who are you to judge? And the answer is, I am nobody. I am nobody to judge at all. God is the ultimate judge. The Torah is the ultimate judge. And who says I'm not allowed to do what I want, and if I want to marry a non-Jew, a Jew talking, then I'll do it. Okay? That doesn't mean I have to say it's okay. Right? That, they say, oh, you're prejudiced. You don't like non-Jews. No, of course. I have nothing against non-Jews. Maybe not the ones in my own family. It's not their fault. It's not their fault they married Jews. Okay, it's a Jew's fault. Doesn't the Torah tell me more than a dozen times not allowed to intermarry? So I said to somebody once, I said, even according to you, let's say you think there was a whole committee, right? There were 4 authors and a redactor, right? The Welthausen documentary hypothesis that I had to sit through when I was in, learning by the conservative movement, hearing this garbage. Okay, even if you hold by that, and it was written by man, so what happened? Even if it was written by man, according to you, and they say, listen, you're not allowed to intermarry, so what's the answer? So what are you going to answer? No, it only meant that generation. No, it only meant when they came into Israel. No, it only meant, okay, so give me an answer, right? And I said this is someone who was intermarried. Right? I said, okay, so give me a legitimate answer that says it's okay, right? A legitimate answer, from the Bible, from the writings, from the Talmud, anywhere that says it's okay. And what was the response? You're a fanatic. Okay, I'm a fanatic. God's a fanatic. Well, Torah's also anti-pig, isn't it? Torah may be anti-non-Jew for different things. Maybe, right? But we have all these laws. So if you break the law and you don't keep Shabbos, doesn't matter what you think, right? We're not interested in what people think. Either you believe God gave the Torah, right? Bottom line, God gave the Torah, gave the mitzvahs, or he didn't. But some people will joke and say, well, God gave the Torah. It depends what line you were in. If you're in the Reform line, you only got a few mitzvahs. If you're in the conservative line, you got a few more mitzvahs. If you're in the Orthodox line, you got everything. Does that make any sense? Doesn't make any sense. God gave the Torah to the entire Jewish people. He doesn't say you can pick and choose. Doesn't say anywhere in my Bible that says you can pick and choose. That being said, who are you to judge? Right? Who am I to judge? I'm not. It's not for me to judge. But if you're going to ask me, is this the right behavior? You want me to say this is okay? That I'm not going to do. Right? That I'm not allowed to do because the Torah says it's forbidden. Once the Torah says it's forbidden, regardless whether I know, whether I understand better, I don't understand better, it doesn't matter. Right? If I buy into the system, if we drink all the same Kool-Aid, it's all the same. Right? God said it, we do it. And that's it. And even if you want to tell me that's not true and I can pick and choose, show me it works. And it doesn't. Because they can't pass it down. So it's not for us, I agree. It's not for me to judge. Not for anybody to judge. But let's call a spade a spade. If the Torah says it's forbidden, it's forbidden. Doesn't matter if you do it by desire. Doesn't matter if you get caught up in the moment. I remember, I started university and, a friend of mine was trying to keep kosher. He's like, I just have this treif urge. I have this non-kosher urge, right? To eat a pepperoni pizza. Like, no, don't do it. You can stand up. He's like, no, I have to do it, right? So if you tell somebody, well, it's optional, it doesn't really matter. I'll do it. I won't do it. It doesn't have that kind of psychosomatic effect. If you tell them it's totally forbidden, oh, wait a minute. That's different. It's like, we're coming up to a fast day on Thursday before Purim, right? So during the week, we're busy, going here, going there, doing different things. Sometimes we just forget to eat. Right? We don't have time, this and that. All of a sudden, now you can't eat or drink. 9 o'clock in the morning, it's like, oh, I'm dying. I'm never going to make it. The fast is another 7 hours. How am I going to make it through? Right? But that's the idea. Right? It's in the mind. Right? It's totally in the mind. So we mentioned over here that a person can't fathom what another person goes through. Right now, whatever they go through, if they fail the test, and again, this is not for me to judge or anybody to judge except for God himself. If they go through a trial and they fail the trial for whatever reason, right, they're going to get an F, probably, right? Unless they did it like there was just desire, they didn't really do it on purpose, or they didn't really know, or no one really taught them. They're still going to get punished, unless they repent. Up to a point, again, depending on severity of what they do. But in general, what's going to be, we're not there to judge, right? But in the end, did the person transgress? It's like someone stole money from somebody. Someone come along and say, no, you don't understand. They didn't have any money. They were freezing. They didn't pay the electric bill. They had to, all kinds of things. That's all true.
Lame is,
right?
Yeah.
You were in property management. Nobody cares. Just give me the rent. You owe us the rent. I don't care what you've gone through, right? Anyone who, who's rented an apartment, they had difficulty, whatever. The landlord doesn't necessarily care unless he's going to cut you some slack, right? Unless he's willing to cut you some slack, or she's willing to cut you some slack, right? But in general, we're not interested in excuses. Nobody's interested in excuses. Did you do this act or not? Right? You didn't. Right? So why should I care? Why? Why should I care what's behind it? Oh, comes along the mission over here and says you have to care. Right? Because it's not the same thing. Right? If you have gone through the same thing, then you can talk. If you haven't gone through the same thing, then okay, that person's going to get judged, right? That person's going to get judged 100%, right? But even if that person is going to get judged, it's not for us, right? It's not for us to say, right? But in the end, in the end over here, we can't imagine what somebody's gone through, even if we've gone through it, right? Even if we've gone through it, then we can understand you may have what to say about the test, right? But if you haven't gone through it, you don't have what to say at all. What's a good example over here? A good example is somebody who went through the Holocaust and survived, right? Now, they saw all kinds of horrors during the Holocaust. They themselves survived, but they're not religious anymore, right? They saw the parents killed, saw the relatives killed. They saw horrific things. So we could say that, oh, this person doesn't believe in God. This person's a heretic. God's going to throw the book at them later. I don't know what God's going to do. I can only say one thing. This person saw absolute atrocities. When they've seen absolute atrocities, how can we judge such a person? So I remember a number of years ago. When I was interviewing for a job to be a rabbi of a synagogue, and I ended up speaking in a Jewish community center about reincarnation. I thought that was an interesting topic, would draw people. So when I got up to speak, I said, well, I just want to mention that, reincarnation is a Jewish concept, right? And 4 people fainted. So I had to revive them, whatever. Spoke about, the struggle between the body and the soul. And in the end, I spoke about reincarnation, right? I spoke for 10, 15 minutes about reincarnation. At the end of this whole talk, this woman comes up to me, and my much older woman comes up to me with a very, very heavy Hungarian accent. It's like, Rabbi, you're very, very clever. It's like, Rabbi, like she's going on and on. And basically, she started telling me she was a child of the Holocaust. Wow. And what she went through and what she saw and what, whatever, unbelievable atrocity. Unbelievable atrocity. So there was somebody there who started basically trying to answer this woman, and I basically just pushed him aside. Just said, you just let her talk. Somebody like this, you let talk. What are you going to say? There was so much into marriage, the reform movement, all these things that were going on. Your parents deserve to die. She's not going to hear that.
No.
Oh, by the way, family members that were killed in front of your face, yeah, they shouldn't have intermarried. They're not going to be able to hear that, right? We don't know what the reason is, right? We don't know what the reason is. We're still too close, right? We can understand what was going on at the time. No question about it. The assimilation, there was intermarriage, all kinds of things, but we can't say, for sure that is the reason, right? But somebody like that, you're not going to judge. Somebody like that, if they survived the war and they stayed religious, those are the people who you want to be like. Those are the people who you want to imitate, because those are the real, what I would call the real deal, because they went through such unbelievable suffering, right? And their emunah, their belief in God was still intact. But, if you've ever read any Holocaust books by Elie Wiesel, right? They're all the same thing. They're all basically the same thing. So imagine all of a sudden something clicked in his head. Oh, that's the reason for the Holocaust. I'm not going to write any more books. Somebody like that, he went through horrors. We went through absolute horror.
Just nightmares.
Right? It's not for us to judge. No question about it. Not for us to judge. Right? Not even close. But at the end of the day, God will deal with them however he deals with them. It's not, we don't have the ability to judge in such a case, right? That would be one example that, unless you've been in their shoes and unless you saw what they saw and went through what they went through, you can't say anything. You have no right to say anything. They're a heretic. They eat pig. They eat treif. They don't keep Shabbos. They don't keep anything, right? Who am I to say anything? They're doing things against God. I get it, right? God will deal with them however he deals with them. But in the end, can we blame them? There are some people came out so much stronger because they saw miracles every second of how they were saved. Now, other people in the family may not have been saved, right? But they themselves saw miracles upon miracles, right? So they came out very different. They absolutely came out very different. But, how can we expect somebody to go through that to remain intact spiritually, right? There were great people that did. There's a book called Hasidic Tales of the Holocaust. Unbelievable stories there. Of great people that even in the depths of absolute, hell, for lack of a better word, they're still asking questions. Can I do this? Can I do that? What happens if this happens? That is a horrific question. These are life and death questions over here, right? So something like this is just one example, right? Something like this, we have nothing to say. We have nothing to say, at all. We're going to say, oh, look at this other person. They survived. They also lost a lot of family. Why can't you be like them? That's not for us to say at all, right? No two people are the same in any way, shape, or form. So that being the case, how can we judge? We can't judge somebody like that. God will be the ultimate judge over here.
Of course.
Right? It's not going to be by us, right? No question. And no one should ever say anything against the Holocaust survivor. It doesn't keep anything, right? It's totally understandable, right? Now, are there great people that did? Yes. Okay, but, not everyone's going to be able to do that, right? And it is, it is understandable. That's one explanation, that you have to be in the person's shoes themselves, right? All things being equal, you have to have gone through it. If you haven't gone through it, you don't have what to say, right? You don't have what to say, meaning to judge them. Yeah, question.
Well, I've been wanting to ask a question online before you really advance. Alexander Helena online, she says, do not judge. Is that even possible? The whole secular and religious systems are based on saying what is wrong and what is right, too. She says, I know we might be wrong, but we cannot also be blind. She goes on to ask a question. The question is, are we obliged to prove our innocency if we are falsely accused by people of doubtful intentions? I know that you're talking to us about not judging, but more and more often, especially those in the 70 nations, I mean, the more I seem to be involved with the Jewish people, the more I get hated on out here, just point blank.
Welcome to the real world.
Well, this is it. I mean, I think in her question, when are we falsely accused? Do we have to sit around and take this? I mean,
no, there is no mitzvah. There is no mitzvah in my language to be a shmata, to be a dish rag, right?
Right.
And if it could cause, let's say, loss of livelihood, something like that, right? So now you come into another factor. The other factor is going to be, what about lashon hara? What about defamation? Now that can come up. I've gotten this question a number of times. Somebody actually asked me once that they have a worker's causing them damage, and they asked me, he said, Rabbi, listen, one punch, it's all it's going to take.
I have to bite my lip and hold
make this
myself back.
I'm not
some
going to make
days.
this up. He's like, Rabbi, I'll pull him aside. I'll pummel him. Right? It's not going to be a problem. Right? I'll just pummel him and that'll be the end of it. So he asked me if he's allowed to do it. Right? Person asked me if he's allowed to do it. Now, person's causing him problems at work. Right? Now, is it potential that he could lose his job? Whatever. I don't know exactly the severity of it. I said to protect yourself from somebody slandering you, that you have a right to do. To go beat someone up, then you're no better than them. Right? Even if it's going to keep them quiet. Even if what you're telling me is true. Right? There's not going to be any repercussions, and all that. Okay. Right? But if you are a JIT, a Jew in training, or even if you're a non-Jew, it gives you the right to do it. Now, someone might say, well, in the non-Jewish world, that's what people do sometimes. Okay. Right? We don't care what people do.
Right. Two wrongs don't make it right.
We care what's right in the eyes of the Torah. Now, if a person's being slandered, right, maliciously, and that the person is saying things that aren't true, because that's what Lashon Hara is, right? It's normally about something that's not true. I mean, it can also be if someone says something true. It can also be Lashon Hara, right? Because it makes them look bad or whatever the case is, right? That we've spoken about as well. But if it's slander, it cause a person their job, and someone slandering them, they have a right to stick up for themselves, right? Now, if what's going to happen, let's say it's a job, we'll just make this easy. If it's let's say a job, and they could cause you to lose your job, and if you speak out against them, now what's going to happen? They may look bad, true, right? They certainly may look bad, and not only that, they may lose their job, right? If they're found guilty. So now this is a catch-22. If I come out and say something which is really true against them, right? Because really that's going to be Lashon Hara also, right? But if in this case you're protecting yourself, right? So that's going to be a different story. If the halacha is, if a person's working, let's say their boss says, Coffman, I heard that who did X, Y, and Z. Yeah, I want to know who it is. Right? Now that's Lashon Hara. I'm not allowed to say. If they would say, listen, if you don't tell me, right? If you don't tell me, then I'm going to fire you. Right? What does the Chofetz Chaim say there in the laws of Lashon Hara? Go find another job. You're not allowed. You have to lose your source of living. It doesn't matter if you have to go begging on the streets. Right? It doesn't matter if you have to go take loans. Find people to give you loans or whatever. And it's going to be rough for you, especially in this environment right now. Right? So even if that is the case, you're not allowed to snitch. You're not allowed to snitch. That's a Torah prohibition. You have to 100% lose your livelihood. Now, you're going to say, that's not fair. Why do I have to lose my livelihood over there? Because God wants you to uphold the Torah, right? So a person will ask, but why would God want me to lose this job? I don't know, right? I have no idea. But obviously there's something better that he wants you to do. He doesn't want you to be there, right? For whatever reason, right? We have to look at it in the positive, not necessarily in the negative. Now, God is using this boss, this slime ball, my language, right? He's using him as a stick. Remember, don't run after the stick.
That's right.
You have to run over the person wielding the power.
I found myself saying that.
Wielding the power is God himself. And he's telling you, this guy's doing something wrong. But I'm not allowing you to answer what he wants you to answer. Now, if it means you're going to lose your job, you don't think there's anything better out there? Right? You are going to get something better. Your spirit, your soul is going to get uplifted because you stood up for Torah, even when it's hard. Right? You had a lot of people that were willing to die than kiss the cross. Right? That is a Torah obligation for Jews. The Inquisition. Right? You have the Inquisition. Torture. So people were willing to die than kiss the cross. Other people weren't. Right? They bowed down and kissed the cross. Now, they have an obligation, according to everybody, they have an obligation to give up their life, right? If a Jew or non-Jew would come to you and say, bow down to this guy in the stick, we're going to kill you, write a reference to JC or a short little fat guy, right? Mr. Buddha say, hey, bow down to Fatso or die. I don't think they call him Fatso, right? But bow down to him or die. You have to die, right? That is the obligation of sanctification of God's name. For a Jew, doesn't apply to a non-Jew, right? Whether it's immorality, murder, or idolatry, right? So that being the case, in any one of these big three, a Jew has the obligation to give up their life.
Right.
If they don't sanctify their life, right? They don't give up their life in a case where they're obligated to Torah prohibition, right? They desecrate God's name over here, right? Because they don't do what they're supposed to do. So they transgress that. Now you have all these Moranos, right? People who come from Moranos, they kissed the cross, but they were secret Jews, or they went into hiding or whatever, or they showed on the outside they were really Christian, but they weren't. Okay. That's something else. But where a person has the obligation to give up their life, right? That Mesiras Nefesh, that self-sacrifice. So that's going to be passed down to their kids, right? And their grandkids, and all that. There are people, as my Rebbe would say, there are people who have all kinds of philosophical agendas, right? They're going to say, no, it didn't really mean then, and I can explain it this way. I don't have to give up my life, whatever. They're the ones that intermarried and their spiritual line is finished, right? They have no spiritual inheritance left. So the question here is, okay, so that was sort of my 20-minute introduction, right? The question on the floor is, do I have to be a dish rag if I'm getting blasphemed, right? If I'm not blasphemed, but if I'm getting blasted over here, someone's trying to embarrass me. Someone is trying to make me look bad, right? Does that mean I should sit there and be quiet, right? That is essentially the question. Are we obligated to prove our innocence, right? Innocency is not a word. No offense, right? It's innocence. Any case, I do this to my kids all the time. My one of my kids will put on, shopping list. Okay, we're going to buy schnitzel. No, it's called schnitzel. Schnitzel, not schnitzel. Okay. Any case, I digress here. If they're falsely accused, right, they have a right to defend themselves. They absolutely have a right to defend themselves. Now, the question is, I see here, what about witnesses? Are they obligated to talk if they are requested to? Yes. Right? This is a Torah obligation. You're just saying on a major thing. That it's a Torah obligation. If you know information, let's say someone's going to court, right? To a rabbinical court, right? To a Jewish court, or God forbid, you have to go to secular court. You have information to back somebody up. You absolutely 100% as a Jew, sure, probably should apply to a non-Jew also. Because in my language, I would say if you back down, you're a wuss. Why are you not giving information? Right? You're going to say, well, we're fighting against the mafia. If I give information, they'll come looking for me. Okay. That might be somewhat of a different issue, maybe. Right? But in this case, this person just hit on a major issue. Right? And the major issue is, if you have witnesses, and you call them and say, listen, I need you to back me up over here because you know what's going on, right? I need you to back me up over here. And they say, I'm afraid to do so. For whatever reason. For whatever reason, I had this also. I had people that were willing to back me up silently, when I was in South America. I mean, it didn't really matter, that much even to come out publicly because they didn't want any repercussions. No. They said what you did was right. When I squealed on someone for selling non-kosher wine, right? So there were people afraid.
Kosher.
There were people who were afraid. I was afraid also to a certain extent. That's why I didn't take it, further than what I should have. Regardless of that, if you have information, if somebody, so let's say better, you have witnesses. These witnesses have information. If they have information and they could help you, acquit you, whatever the situation is, they 100%, according to the Torah, they 100% have an obligation to come and give testimony.
Right. Somebody's asking that question about, maybe being subpoenaed in court. They have that obligation, right?
They would have an obligation. If a person is subpoenaed in a non-Jewish court, right? Now, you're not the one taking them to a non-Jewish court. The Torah says, we read 2 weeks ago, these are the laws of the Torah, right? Right after Mount Sinai, it's Parshas Mishpatim. It's the longest Torah, it's the longest Parsha in that it speaks about the most mitzvahs, right? It's not the most verses, but it's the most mitzvahs that are given in one Parsha. All the laws of damage, many of the laws of damages that fill up 3 tractates of Talmud, major tractates of Talmud, right? So the first thing that the Torah says is, over there it says, these are the laws, the place before you. So one of the rabbis come along and say, before you, not in front of non-Jews. Now, if there are 2 litigants, 2 Jews, right? There are 2 Jews, and whatever, someone, Ruvain damaged Shimon. Shimon says, okay, I'm gonna take you to the rabbinical court, right? 2 Jews. And Shimon says, I'm not going. He says, I refuse to go. Or if Shimon refuses to go, you're not allowed to go to secular court unless you invite him to a rabbinical court. And if the first time you invite him, he doesn't show up, they invite him a second time. If after the second time he doesn't show up, the rabbinical court will call, and it says you got an obligation to come to, this next time. If the third time the person doesn't come, what does the rabbinical court do? They'll hear what Shimon is going to say. They'll hear what his case is, and if they feel he's got a case, they'll allow him to go to secular court. Now, they're not going to allow to go to secular court straight away, right? That you're not allowed to. That is a serious prohibition. Even if this person's not going to come to secular court, it's not enough. You have to invite him, right? So my Rebbe says like this: we don't want to go to secular courts, because their laws are twisted, and if their laws are twisted, maybe you're not going to get a fair shake, right? Because maybe it goes against, Jewish law, religious law. So why do you want to go to secular court in the first place? Good question, right? It's a legitimate question. But what's the simple answer? Because if we wouldn't allow this to happen, and at least you have some way to get your money back, then every one of the mother's going to do it, right? There's going to be no repercussions, right? Reuven is always going to damage Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, and he knows there aren't going to be any ramifications because he's never going to show up to court, right? He's never going to show up to a Jewish court. Jewish courts don't have the same power as they used to. He's going to get away scot-free, right? Even if you tell me, well, going to secular court is second best. I get it. It's second best. Do you have any other choice? What's the other choice? There is no other choice, right? That's what you have to do. So in this case, you are subpoenaed to secular court. You're not taking the person to court. It's not your issue. You don't care if there are 2 Jews. You don't care if one person ever went to rabbinical court or not. But if you have information, you have to give it over. Now, just one other side point, and that is that if they were to ask you, right, if they were to ask you in the secular court, you swear to tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God, right? And, as Curly would say in the Three Stooges, certainly.
Certainly.
Right? He's like, do you swear? No, but I know all the words, right? So we're not going to go down that path. But in general, if they were to ask you to swear, a Jew is not allowed to swear, right?
No
in other
oaths.
words, if you get a passport, right? You get a passport and they say, do you swear, do you testify everything you said is true? Now, you can't say, I swear. That's forbidden for a Jew. You're allowed to say, I confirm.
Right.
Right? I confirm is good enough. Right? So if a Jew, God forbid, is subpoenaed in court and they have to give testimony and they're going to ask him, do you swear to tell the whole truth? They have to say, I confirm. They are not allowed to say that I swear. But if a person knows information, right? If they know information, it's not just it's the right thing to do, right? Maybe for non-Jews, it would apply to them, right? Because, that would be the noble thing to do. Maybe it doesn't come under the law, under the Noahide laws, probably should, right? I would think it should. For a Jew, there's nothing to talk about. There's an absolute obligation. If you don't go to court, you bear the sin. You forget whether the person wins or loses. It doesn't matter. You had an opportunity to give over information, and you little wuss didn't want to give over the information for whatever reason, right? That makes logical sense. I mean, not you're going to call him a wuss or a little wuss, but you have an obligation to defend somebody if you have information, right? That's 100% true, right? If they are witnesses, that's the question. Are they obligated to talk? Yes, they are. Now, there's a little more complicated issue, and the complicated issue is, what if there's stronger ramifications, right? What if it could be life-threatening? What if they don't want to go into the, change their identity, move to another place, and all that because they're afraid, right? Legitimately, they are, they're afraid, of the big M, right? They're afraid of the mafia. That's what they're afraid of. Would they have an obligation? Would they have an obligation not to give testimony? That
putting themselves in jeopardy, you mean?
They're putting themselves in jeopardy, right? On the other hand, they have an absolute Torah obligation. No question about it, according to everybody. There's a Torah obligation. You have to give testimony. But if they're afraid for their lives, right, so it could be, in this case, maybe they don't, right? You have to have someone with much broader shoulders than me, right, for that. But I could see where on that side of the equation, then they have a right, right? They absolutely have a right because their life's in danger. But what about the person, who needs the help? Isn't their life in danger? Maybe their life's in danger also, right? So then you come to the, to the Talmudic dictum, who's to say your life, your blood is redder than mine, right? You're in the desert. Person, God forbid, in the desert, there's a flask of water. It's only going to be good enough for one person. One person grabs it, right? It's theirs now, right? Who says that they have to give it to the other person? Because if they split it half and half, they'll both die, right? No mitzvah in both of them dying, right? But what's the Talmudic dictum over here? Talmudic dictum is, who says my blood is redder, right? Who says I have to die, right? Okay, it's you or me. It's you or me. That's it. Even if it's you or me, I don't have the right to die over here. There's no obligation, right? Seemingly, there's no obligation, right? So if they have, again, if it's not life and death situation, right, which probably in most cases probably not, right, not life and death, so then you have an obligation. You 100% will have an obligation. Now, what happens if a person gives testimony and it costs them in other ways? Okay, but again, who runs the world over here? You don't lose out by keeping Torah laws, even if it looks that way, right? Most people in the process of conversion, I can tell you, and even people who want to be Noahites, and do the right thing, the evil inclination doesn't want, right? For a person to convert, they're put through a ringer. It makes it very, very, very hard for them to convert. In the end, the bottom line is only the few survive. But they have to, they have to fight very hard in order to do it, right? That is going to be their obligation. A person has to keep that in mind, that regardless of what happens, we often forget that there is a God who runs the world. Even though, in the short run, a person is suffering now, right? A person is suffering now, and things can come out of nowhere, like when you least expect it. At the end of the day, it could be a big blessing, right? For any number of reasons. That's what I would say about that. There's a question here. Is there any time limit we're obligated to forgive? Let's say someone caused us damage. Whatever. Is there a time limit? You have to remember. What does the Rambam say? The Rambam says, the person comes to you for forgiveness. You understand what they're coming to you for forgiveness for. They're not necessarily going to tell you, well, I did this, that, and the other thing, because you're not going to want to grant them forgiveness. But they come to you and say, listen, they come before Rosh Hashanah. And they say, if I've done anything bad, will you forgive me? Right? So now, let's say a person can't. Let's say they've done some, let's say in my case, use myself as an example. Right? This person that stole all my money is still alive and kicking. I'm not doing so well, but he's still alive and kicking. So if he would come to me, which he never has, but let's say, this guy would come to me and say, listen, I really didn't mean it, and I got caught up and this and that. Could you ever forgive me? And let's say, for argument's sake, it's sincere, which I don't believe. But let's say it's sincere. So the Rambam says clear, as well as other rabbinical authorities, I should forgive on the spot. I ruined your life, caused you all kinds of problems, made you move countries, all kinds of issues over the years. Is that an easy thing to do? No. It's not an easy thing to do. Right? Now, let's say you say no. You say, scram, I'm not forgiving you. He comes back a second time. He said, listen, you don't understand. I really feel bad. I want to have the slate clean. This, that. Can you forgive me? And let's say somebody who might like me, who is stubborn, which I am. I can be. Right? So you say, no, bug off. Third time he comes. Now, third time he comes with 5 other people. Now, when it comes with the whole entourage, not as a threat, comes with the whole entourage to melt you. Now you're going to be embarrassed to tell him to scram. It depends how angry you are. If you're so angry and ticked off, you're not going to care if it brings 100 people. Right? And it brings all the rabbis in the world. Maybe it's not going to help. But at that point, after the third time, you say scram, then the person has to come back to you. Why? Because you should have looked the other way, and you should have looked at him as a stick. You didn't look at him as a stick. You get all the transgressions now. Now you're going to say, I don't understand. This person caused damage, real damage, right? In a lot of different ways. If that is the case, why do I have to forgive him? Why in the world do I have to forgive him over here? Because you're not looking at the bigger picture. Because it doesn't matter how you lost the money, God's using this person as a stick. Obviously, you were meant to lose it, right? In other ways. Now, we understand that up here. Put it in your heart, and the way it was done, and how everything else transpired, that's a little hard to take. That's a little hard to take. So someone's going to ask, what? God expects us to be righteous? He expects us to be tzaddikim? Right? When it comes to this, about not bearing a grudge, not hating a Jew in your heart, etc., right? Book of Leviticus chapter 19. What does the Torah there say? Torah doesn't make any distinction of anybody. God just says this is your obligation. If that's your obligation, we're not talking about someone who's totally righteous. That's who the Torah is given to. Torah is given to everybody. Right now, what's the reason we should look the other way? Very simple, because if we look the other way of what someone did against us, especially something egregious, God's going to look the other way for what we did against him. Now let's think about this in real time. Every single time we transgress, for a non-Jew, it's worse because they're liable for the death penalty, right? Any negative thing they do, because it's something universal, which we mentioned many times. For a Jew, it's different, right? Not everything's going to get the death penalty. Many things he won't get the death penalty. But imagine every single time he does the wrong thing, but you know better. You gave in to your evil inclination. And just, it becomes part of your nature now. And it's so hard to overcome. It's true. No one's going to deny it, but what are you doing? You are rebelling against God. That's essentially what you're doing. Now, whether it's by desire, etc. It's like we mentioned before that in Proverbs that the Vilna Gaon, Rav Elijah Vilna, more than 250 years ago, Rav Elijah Vilna says in the Rambam, first Rambam in the Laws of Repentance says that we have an obligation to repent even something we did by accident, right? So that's a huge novelty over here. Why do I have an obligation? Why do I have an obligation to repent by something I did accident? I can understand I did it on purpose, nothing to talk about, right? But if I did it by accident, I stood up against the wall, wasn't paying attention on Shabbos or a festival, the light went on, the light went off. I didn't have intention. Definitely not my intention. Okay, I was careless. I wasn't paying attention. Good. So why do I have to beat my chest on Yom Kippur? Why do I have to beat my chest on Yom Kippur, even things I didn't know? Or even things I did by accident? So says the Vilna Gaon, my Rebbe brings down, right, from the Vilna Gaon. And the Vilna Gaon says this is a scary thing. How can a person ever do anything by accident? It's impossible. How can someone ever do anything by accident? Why? How is it really possible? Because essentially, I should never be able to do anything by accident. What's the answer? The answer is you must have done something on purpose. Once you've done something on purpose against God, you opened yourself up to sin. That's what you did. You 100% opened yourself up to sin. Once you've opened up yourself to sin on purpose, your vessel, your body is a body of sin. Therefore, I can do something by accident. If it wouldn't be that, there's no possible way. Right? Vilna Gaon says there's no possible way. So, therefore, if we would look at the bigger picture in general, right, and realize, okay, someone's causing us pain, someone is causing us difficulty, doesn't mean I have to sit there and take it, right? It doesn't mean I have to be a dish rag over here, right? I can answer, I can try and fight against it and whatever, but in general, if that person, who caused us damage comes to us and says, they don't even mention what they did. It really doesn't matter because you know what they did. And they come and say, will you forgive me? And it's before, it's before Yom Kippur. Will you come and forgive me? This is a hard thing, right? Because we are petty people in general. I'm not talking about something egregious, but, someone might have done something wrong and we may feel, we got jilted, we got gypped, people, took advantage, whatever the case is. And we may be upset. I'm not saying you don't have a right to be upset. We might 100% be upset. At the end of the day, it doesn't mean I shouldn't forgive. Now, this is a very difficult thing because if we felt we were wronged and something came out of the blue, we didn't feel we deserved it. The reality is that God felt you did for whatever reason. So the way we need to look at it is whatever happens to us, we have an absolute obligation. We have an absolute obligation not to be a dish rag, right? We can certainly try and fight, certainly fight against this. But again, there's the bigger picture, right? And not everyone is willing to see, or not many people are willing to see the bigger picture, right? If we would, the Chovos Levavos and duties of the heart, Shar B'tachon, right? And the gate of belief and faith in God makes clear, right? He makes clear anything that happens to us is a sign from above, in general. Even if we're sloppy, even if we're careless or whatever, right? We are looking at the person wielding the power. We're not jumping up and down at the stick. That's a mistake. He's saying that's an absolute mistake. Now, I would ask the following question, even that being true, right? Even that being true, let's say we understand that. We put it in our minds. We think about it. We meditate on it, etc. When it happens to us, we're yelling and screaming. We're jumping up and down. You were texting. You ran through this red light. You did this. You were negligent. That's all true. That's all 100% true. There's only one problem, the way you look at it. Isn't it true that maybe this person's just a stick? God wants to damage you. He wants to hit you in the pocket, so this is the way he does it. This is the way he does it. Now we're hitting on something that I do not think the vast majority of people are holding by at all. At all. Except very few. Why? Because this is a very hard thing to do.
Sure.
Right? And what the Chovos Levavos says that we should be whistling Dixie. I don't even know how to do that, but we should be whistling Dixie if someone does this to us, giving us this trial and tribulation. We should be thanking them for the opportunity. So I would say, if I was living the same time as the Chovos Levavos, I said that's great. That's unbelievable mussar over here. Who's holding by it? Who's holding by it?
Getting darker.
A person gets damaged and they get hurt. They say, God, thank you very much. I'm so happy you're putting me through this. I can't walk and I can't this and I can't that. Who's holding by it? When a person goes through a difficult time, I know some people like this. Get rid of it. Just take care of it. Move it. Get rid of it. They don't want to deal with it. They don't want to deal with it at all. Right? Even life's most precious issues. I'm not talking about, I can't screw with a light bulb. and there's the light out, and the main light out in your room, the person goes absolutely bananas. I know some people like this, unfortunately, they go absolutely nuts. Oh, gotta call the guy, gotta get it fixed, gotta get it done, gotta get this. Okay, it's an issue. It doesn't run your life. It's not like so catastrophic. Oh my gosh, the light went out. What are we gonna do? Okay, so that's something else. But in the bigger scheme of things, nobody wants to deal with anything. Nobody wants to go through pain. Not saying that, it's something that's enjoyable. Nobody wants to go through it. Nobody wants to deal with it. People want things fixed. A person going through difficulty, let's say with livelihood, right? What does the person pray for? God, fix it. You're the one in charge. That's true. That's what we should pray for. God should take care of it. We also have to put our best foot forward. We're not going to sit back and say, okay, now what? So the mantra is, God, you're the one in charge. You want me to suffer? I'm going to try and be better. I'm going to try and be stronger spiritually in all this, but you are the one that's in charge, right? You are the one in charge. If you're the one in charge, you can make it or break it, right? That is the mantra, right? That is absolutely the mantra, right? Now, can someone do something based on stupidity? 100%. There are people that can do things. They're careless. They're sloppy. They text while they're driving. They drink and drive, whatever, right? That 100%, is doing erratic behavior. That's totally wrong and could cost someone potentially their life, right? They're not guarding themselves, not guarding other people. That's all true. At the end of the day, though, when it's a person's time to go, if that's the way it happens, that's the way it happens, right? If it happens a different way, okay. Not everyone's going to die in their sleep at a ripe old age. Not everyone, is going to have an easy death or whatever. Some people will be more violent, less violent. We're not in control. We 100% in general are not in control, right? Just about anything, right? I can control someone who's drank too much and gets on the road and then smashes someone's car. They walk out without a scratch. They kill 3 people, right? I'm not in control of that. We're not in control of that. Someone, was the case here many years ago. A 3-year-old fell in the manhole, right? And someone in Israel, someone jumped in to try and save this 3-year-old. The 3-year-old died because of toxic fume, and the person who jumped in. I don't know if he's still alive or not, but the person who jumped in because of his toxic gas they're in a coma, right? They probably died already, but they were in a coma for a while. So now someone will ask the $1 million question. I don't get it. First of all, 3-year-old child dying, that's not punishment for the child, right? Because the child's not liable for punishment until they hit the age of 20, right? At least till after bar mitzvah until the age of 20. So it can't be punishment for the child itself, right? There's something else going on. But regardless of that, I can ask a very simple question, right? There are 2 questions. What's the story with the child? Why is the child dying? But the second question, which I think is a better question, and that is someone goes in to save the child, how do they come out brain damaged? How in the world they come out and, now they're in a coma? So you tell me, simple answer is, well, maybe the person wasn't really thinking. They thought by emotion, not by brain, right? If it was an open manhole, maybe there's a good chance it's toxic gas. If there's a chance it's toxic gas, you got to think, if I jump in, I could potentially die. Right? That there's a story of a football player, and I can't make fun of the CFL because he didn't play in the CFL. Played in the NFL. He's 20 years old. He was 20 years old, 21 years old. He jumped in the water to save somebody from drowning. Right? There was only one problem. He didn't know how to swim. Right? So he thought about somebody else, right? Saving someone's life. That is a tremendous thing. But if you don't know how to swim, you don't jump in. Right? And what happened? He drowned. He himself drowned. I think the other person drowned also. I don't remember if the other person drowned or not, but he certainly drowned. You don't jump in if you can't drown, right? Your life comes first. You do whatever you can to save the person, right? But I remember when I was in camp, it took junior life saving. You don't just jump in. You have to know what you're doing. Sure, because if you jump in with all your clothes and you weight it down, what's the other person going to do? They're going to push you down to save their own life, right? Because they can't breathe, right? They're drowning. So you have to know what to do, how to handle them, because if not, you will drown. You 100% will drown over there unless you know what you're doing. So therefore, you're not jumping in. You 100% are not going to jump in over. It doesn't make sense. Now, what happens? This person thinks that he's doing the greatest thing. He's trying to save a life. And he gets upstairs and he says, God, why didn't you save me? He said, well, that was your time. He said, you don't have any merit to save yourself. And this is the whole discussion in and of itself. You had no merit to protect you because you weren't doing any mitzvahs, right? It was a non-Jew, right? You weren't doing any mitzvahs. You were liable for death penalty anyway. So I took it out on you like this. So what's the person going to say? Right? What's this soul going to answer? What's he going to say? Right? God's going to, and the angels are going to sit there laughing. They're going to sit there laughing their brains out, throwing popcorn and other things at this soul because they say, you are stupid, 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 stupid. So who told you to jump in? I understand what the brain says. The brain says try and save the person. I get it. Right? It makes perfect sense. But you're missing a major factor. You don't have a boat. You don't know how to swim. You don't have anything to throw the person. So what do? I jump in. That's beautiful. But you don't know how to swim. Right? It's Coffman's 615th commandment. Don't be a moron. You cannot jump in the water if you don't know how to swim. Right? In that case, I would say that's called suicide. You just threw away your life for nothing. For nothing. Right? God wants you to be smart. He doesn't want you to do that. He doesn't want you to put yourself in danger. If it's a doubt whether there's danger or not, that's one thing. And a person put themselves, they end up dying. That's one thing. If it's for sure danger, I'm not allowed to put my life in danger. Non-Jew also.
Even like firefighters or rescuers?
Say again?
Like, say, firefighters or rescue workers. I mean, I live in mountains.
But they're trained.
Right.
They're absolutely trained.
They're designed for it.
Sure. They're designed for that. Okay. Right? You're going to say what? If you didn't have firefighters, you'd have a lot more people that would die from fire.
You're right. Yeah.
Right? 100%. Or you limit them and say, okay, you do everything from the outside. You don't go in. Right? So that's not putting your life in danger. You're far enough away from the fire. You put the fire out with the hoses. Whoever dies. Right? But you'll have people that will go in, that will risk their lives. Yeah, that's whatever. That's a good question. What if that's their profession? Their profession is to risk their lives.
Well, soldiers are the same thing, right?
Soldiers also, right? But you keep in mind, in the time of King David, there was always a standing army. You always needed a standing army for protection. Now, you also needed people sitting and learning, right? You needed people sitting and learning to have that siyata d'shmai, to have that heavenly help, right? So that's one of the things the left here say about the ultra-Orthodox. You have to share the burden. Do the army. Why should our kids die and your kids not? Well, you could also get an exemption, etc. But it's not even about that, right? First of all, wars are fought a little bit differently today than they were way back when. And not only that, they don't need as many people. They got plenty of people. They got plenty of people in the army. Regardless of that, there's another issue, right? There's another more subtle issue. The other more subtle issue is you go into the army, they want you to be like everybody else, right? They don't want you to stay religious. There are separate religious groups, separate religious, groups in the army. They can be, men can be with men, etc. There will be, separate units, etc. So if a person's going to do the army, that's a good way to do it. But in general, they throw this out there. Oh, you got to share the burden. In the left, their whole goal is to uproot Torah and mitzvahs. So if a person's in the army and, we're not talking about the cream of the crop or sitting and learning, right? So they're already at risk anyway. But you put them in any situation. You put them in this type of situation, with other women, they're goners. They're goners. I had a whole discussion with somebody once. Somebody was modern Orthodox and did the army, the whole long discussion. And finally, he said, well, if it wasn't for me in the army, Syria would come and invade. Now, that's heresy, right? Because it's not about the army that's saving us over here. The army here has made screw up after screw up many times. It's miraculous that Jews live here in the first place, against 20 different nations. But we're not going to get so political, right? But in general, you got people sitting and learning. If you didn't have people sitting and learning, we'd be sitting ducks for years. We wouldn't even be here. I'd be somewhere else right now, somewhere safe, so to speak. So what this person said, if it wouldn't be for me, for us serving the army, that Syria would come and invade. So I said, oh, it only took you 20 minutes to become a heretic. I was timing it. So I said, what do you mean a heretic? I said, do you believe in Torah? Yes. Do you believe Torah protects? Yes. Do you keep Shabbos? Yes. So I said, well, if you think Syria is going to come and invade because you're in the army, then obviously you don't have that much faith in God that God can protect and that Torah protects. No, you don't understand. No, but that's heresy, right? People have to understand why that is heresy. Because you're saying, Koach Otzim V'yadi, right? The power of my hand.
Wow.
The power of my arm is one saving everybody over here. Not true, right? You have to put your best foot forward. That's why you always need a standing army. But it's not just that. You always have people sitting and learning. That's the X factor. People sitting and learning are protecting the country. That's what's really protecting the country. It's not the army or nuclear weapons, right? It's not nuclear weapons either, right? Even though anybody knows we have, don't tell anyone where I live, but we have them and we'll nuke you, but that's not the point, right? It's a deterrent. But you have 20 hostile nations outside of Israel want to demolish this country, which is no bigger than the state of New Jersey, right? So it's not about land, right? It's not about one strip of land. They want to annihilate the Jews. That's what they want. That's clear, right? That 100% is clear. So the fact that we exist is not because of the army. There were big miracles, by the 6-Day War, etc. There were unbelievable miracles, no question, that tens of thousands of Jews should have died. We shouldn't be here right now and all that. But, Israel has survived. Now, just one side point, about doing the army. I had a secular Jew last year, hammered me with a bunch of, very basic leftist Jewish, quote unquote, theology. What was one of the three things they asked me about? One was there are women, ultra-Orthodox women that wear shawls, almost like burqas, right? They call them the shawl women, right? They've been denounced. They're basically, adding extra levels of modesty that, don't need to be, right? So, many rabbis come out against them, my Rebbe included. A bunch of wackos. That was the first thing. This is like the secular Jew grew up in Israel, right? They got three basic questions they want to ask. One's about these women that nobody holds of. Second is Naturi Karta, right? Who are the Naturi Karta? These ultra-Orthodox Jews that kissed Arafat's hand, that don't believe in the state of Israel, which many people don't, which really doesn't matter, right? But the big time left is saying we should live, under the Arabs, which nobody holds by them either, right? They're a fringe element. Nobody holds by them. Nobody in the ultra-Orthodox community. So I knocked that off in like 30 seconds. The third thing that bothered them, because they can't really sleep at night living in the States all these years, is why don't ultra-Orthodox Jews do the army? I had to do the army growing up in Israel. So I'm going back and forth, different things, and then I hit my checkmate comment.
Uh-oh.
And my checkmate comment was, okay, we have separate units. There are some ultra-Orthodox Jews that serve in the army. Okay. But they're serving in separate units. Because what happens when you mix men and women at the age of 18, right? And they're in close quarters. They're like, come on, it's a normal thing. It's like university, and it's like this, and it like, it can't be so prude. I said, okay, let me hit knockout blow. And what was the knockout blow? My checkmate comment was, I said, well, you do realize, and only, if you know this piece of information, then right? But most Israelis are aware of the fact that a woman, when she serves in the army 2 years, 3 years, however long she serves, there is no obligation for women to serve. If they want to, they can do community service, as well. But, if they do serve, okay. But it is on the books. We're just going to state this and make everyone's hair come out. That it is on the books according to the law in this country. I don't think it's changed. Not the latest I've heard. And that is a woman who does the army in Israel is permitted up until the time she serves and finishes. She's permitted for 3 abortions.
Permitted what?
Let that sink in. In other words, the army itself will pay a woman who's in the army for however long. If she gets pregnant, they'll perform the abortion and they'll pay for it. So when I said that, this woman was like, oh, I'm not going there. I'm not going there. I said, you're right. You're not going there because you have not one thing to answer. That's why we're not sending our boys in the army. Well, you want to go to a separate unit? We'll send them to a separate unit, right? I heard a great rabbi once say, a university, what do you call it, dormitory. He said, yeah, you can pick up a lot of things in university, like narcotics. And there's a bunch of subjects you can learn, like booze and women, right? So what he said this years ago, probably said it 40, 50 years ago, right? Even before I went to university.
When we were young.
And he said a dormitory like this, men and women together. He goes, we call that in the vernacular. We're not going to get, we're going to keep this PG-13 because I know you still want to have ratings and we're not on controversial issues. And that is, it's a brothel. That's what goes on, right? There's unbelievable immorality that goes on in university. I was there, right? I was witness to it.
I know you went to an Ivy League school too. Yeah.
Right. I don't want to get, fully off topic here, but I want people to understand there are serious moral issues, right? There are serious moral issues for Jews and non-Jews, whether in university, you're in the army. These things are going to come up, especially if you're at that tender age. You're at the age 18, 19, hormones going crazy. In a secular world, secular environment, anything can happen. Anything can happen, right? So is it out of the realm of reality? Out of the realm of reality that a person can, go to the army and get pregnant? I had somebody that I was working with for conversion, and this woman, whatever, was telling me that, yeah, she was in the army and then she got discharged and whatever. And I said, so what happened? So she told me she didn't want to really stay until I sort of didn't get the message. And that was that she said she had a medical condition. So I was like, oh, interesting. Okay. I was wondering what the medical condition was. And the medical condition was she got pregnant. That was the medical condition, right? She just didn't want to say it. She didn't want to say it outright. Now, can these things happen? They can happen. Right? Now you're going to ask how probable, how common? I don't know. Right? I would think if a woman has that option, if God forbid a woman has that option and it's on the books for law, that the army will pay for up to 3. What does that say? What that says is there's an issue. There's an issue with promiscuity in the army. That's what it says. So when I gave over my checkmate blow over here, so I said, if my son wanted to do the army, which one of my sons did, he went into a special unit, right? It was all men, right? They didn't see women. He didn't see women for 2 years, right? They weren't. I mean, it's not they didn't see women. There weren't women on the base. They weren't allowed on the base or anywhere inside of where they were, right? They had separate religious units. It's okay. If that is the case, then that's how you ensure immorality, right? I mean, in the bigger scheme of things, if you put everybody mixed together with hormones going absolutely crazy, what do you expect? Right? That is, that's the case. Someone ever asked, what if you have doubts about saving someone? You have to see if the situation's dangerous. Right? If you don't know the situation is dangerous, you can try and save them. We're talking about a case where this person knew it was dangerous because he couldn't swim. Or let's say there was a fire, and you can see the fires going all over the place. That's a dangerous situation. Person go in, the whole building can collapse. I get it, family members, etc. Right? But what happens if a person goes in, they get burned to a crisp, right? Or the smoke inhalation, they pass out. They could save someone, but again, they're putting themselves in a dangerous situation. Now, what would most people say? Most people say, what a hero. What an absolute hero. See, this is why not only you need ethics, right? This is why you need Torah, a Torah perspective. Let's say someone saves a bunch of family members, but, they have, they take in too much smoke and they die. Let's just say. But they saved a number of family members. Maybe some family members died. Whatever, they save a bunch of family members. Everybody's going to look at this person as a hero, right? They're absolutely going to look at this person as a hero. What's the problem, right? What in the world is the problem, The problem is that the Torah tells me I'm not allowed to put myself in danger. I understand it's loved ones. I understand the blood is pumping. The endorphins are going crazy. You're putting yourself in a dangerous situation. So the whole world, right, be on CNN, be on CNBC, MSN, all these places. And they'll say, wow, this person was a hero. This person's like a god. Look what he did, to save his family. That is true. That 100% is true. In the eyes of God, in the eyes of the Torah, he just forfeited his life. He forfeited his life and he committed suicide. Right? Now, suicide's a pretty serious thing. Suicide is, you don't get buried in a Jewish cemetery. Suicide is, there are no mourning customs. There is no resurrection of the dead. We're not saying where he shot himself in the head, right? Then he might have had mental issues, and probably most people had mental issues that killed themselves, right? Could very well be they'll be exempt over here, right? Because they had some sort of mental issues, and it takes a lot for someone to kill themselves, right? So we would say probably a lot of people have mental issues that end up going through with it. But even so, someone puts themselves in a dangerous situation. 100% it's dangerous. And that person dies. Why is that not called suicide? That should be called suicide, right? If it was a situation, as my Rebbe once, I said, if I took a bus, I went somewhere, that was a dangerous place. Yeah, you end up getting, a person got stoned or they got killed or whatever. Is that called suicide? And he said no. Why not? Because it doesn't mean the danger is imminent. If it's an imminent danger, again, I'm only speaking in generalities here. If it's an imminent danger, and a person knows that if they go in there, they literally could die. They're going into an inferno, right? They literally could die over here. And they end up dying. That's tragic. It's definitely tragic. The person, everyone's going to say, was a hero, was an absolute hero. And the person has guts, I'm not saying not. And he's driven by adrenaline and endorphins and saving his family. That's all true. But what about what the Torah says? What about what God says? Doesn't God say I'm not allowed to put myself in a dangerous situation if I know it's dangerous? Not if it's a doubt, right? Keep in mind, that was the question here. What if it's a doubt? What if it's a doubt?
It's possible you could say
it's
something.
Possible that it's not a dangerous situation. That's different. I'm talking about 100% it's a dangerous situation. If it is a dangerous situation and you think, oh, I know better, doesn't matter, I can't swim, I'm going to rely on God. You're an idiot. You're an idiot because you cannot rely on a miracle. God's not all of a sudden going to make you allow you to swim. Right? There are cases, child's underneath a car, a truck, whatever, and a person has superhuman strength at one time with all the energy, whatever, they pick up the car and save the child, okay? Right? But being in a place where you can't swim, being in a place you're surrounded by fire, that's not the same thing. Yeah, question.
Yeah, Rabbi, I just wanted to ask, because there was this famous Star Trek movie where Spock dies, okay? And the point being, their engine was going to blow, and so he goes into this radiation chamber, and he corrects the issue, but it ends up costing him his life, and they really had real drama. The point of the matter is, he's telling Captain Kirk at the end, he says the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the one. And it had such powerful punch, in public opinion, as if there was a nobility to actually put your life in jeopardy to save masses. And
let me tell you what the Mishnah says. There's a Mishnah that says that if someone, let's say, a non-Jewish authority say, okay, we rounded up 100 people. We rounded up 100 people. You give us one person, we'll let everyone go. What do? Right? So the Mishnah unequivocally says, good SAT word, unequivocally, I even said it straight. Next week when Alka-Seltzer is going to take effect, we're going to see what's going to happen. Right? But at least I can say it now and I can still go like this. right? So I haven't had that much to drink or anything to drink, right? But in general, what does the Mishnah answer? Unequivocally, the Mishnah says you're not allowed to turn the other person over. If they
But
say,
you could step
give us
forward yourself.
Ruvain, 1 second, they say, give us Ruvain, otherwise we're going to kill 99 people here.
Right.
You're not allowed to do it. You're not allowed to do it. Now, if we would say, let's think this out logically. Ruvain did something wrong, right? Let's just say he did something wrong against the government, whatever. Government's now taking revenge, right? Non-Jewish government. We can't imagine something like this could happen, right? If it talks about the Mishnah,
like Masada,
it's obviously happened, right? It's obviously happened in the past. Not to mention the fact that you have cases of non-Jews, taking rabbis for ransom and all that. And the Gemara says you're not allowed to ransom them, right? Because if you ransom them, you give them a lot of money, they're going to do it again. They're going to do it again. Rabbeinu Asher, lived in the year 10,000, 1100. One of the great rabbis in Germany, and his Rebbe was the Maharama Rutenberg. The Maharama Rutenberg, of blessed memory, was taken in by the authorities, was taken to jail, and they wanted to ransom him. They wanted a lot of money, and the Maharam said, absolutely not. Absolutely not. You do not ransom me for any amount of money, right? Because the Gemara says I'm not allowed to do it, because if I do it, they're going to do it again and again, right? Everyone knows the famous story happened a number of years ago with Gilad Shalit, right? Gilad Shalit, an Israeli soldier, taken prisoner by Hamas, and they wanted like 1,000 prisoners with like blood on their hands, for one prisoner, right? So the halacha is you can't give him over. You're not allowed to give him over for exactly this reason. Now, there's a lot of pressure on the Israeli government, back and forth, all these different things. They eventually did it, and there were people with blood on their hands that committed other atrocities, after they let him go. Right? But what is the straight halacha? The straight halacha is you can't do anything. You can't do it. It doesn't matter how tragic it is. The halacha is if I let him go, if I get rid of these prisoners, however many there are, 150, 200, whatever it is, you give these prisoners for this one Jewish prisoner. I'm not saying Jewish life doesn't have any meaning, right, etc. But in the end, you're not allowed to. Halachically speaking, you're not allowed to. Why? Because they'll do it again, and they'll do it again, and they're not going to stop doing that, right? But Israel caved in. They caved in, to a tremendous amount of pressure, right? So the answer is, as we said, if it's bring us this person, we're going to kill everyone else, everybody dies. Right? Everybody dies. Everyone has an obligation to die. Now, that we don't make any distinction. Right? Meaning that this is a Mishnah where seemingly everyone agrees. So, and the Gemara certainly says as such, because if we allow this, the non-Jews are going to do it all the time. They'll take Jewish leaders, they'll take other people, they'll ransom them. You can't do it because there'll never be an end. Right? As tragic as it may sound, you're going to say 99 people are going to die. Right? Now, you don't know also. They say, we're not going to kill everybody. You give us him, you all live. Well, that may be true, may not be true. Right? It's like playing Russian roulette over here.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
They don't know. Right? 100% they don't know if they're going to live or not. They could also die, and it's like, yeah, just kidding. Boom. Right? And they kill everybody. Right? So in this case, you're not allowed to hand anybody over. And people say, well, what if these 99 people die? So the only answer we have is that this is what God wanted over here. He wanted them to die, but you have to stand up to what Jewish law says. Right? That's what Jewish law says. Right? And if that's what Jewish law says, we're not going to change it. Because in either case, they may be bluffing. They 100% could be bluffing. But the real argument is who's to say whose blood is redder over here. Yeah. Right? In other words, you hand over Reuben, let's say they let 99 people go. So now Reuben's a goner. Right? So now you say, well, how do I know his blood is redder than someone else's? And the answer is, we don't say his blood is redder than mine. We don't say that. Right? In other words, we don't say it to permit it. It's forbidden because your blood is red, my blood is red. Right? If both our blood is red, who's to say yours is more important than me? Right? Your blood is redder than mine. So therefore, under any circumstances, you should be not allowed to give him over. Right? There's no rhyme or reason. Right? Absolutely no rhyme or reason to give him over. Yeah, question.
Well, I wanted to ask because this question was asked last week about Masada. Are you familiar with the event of Masada?
Yeah.
Probably during the Bar
Yes.
Kokhba era.
Yeah.
Where the Romans had them cornered and they all went over
Right.
the edge rather than. I don't know under what mindset would that be permissible?
So there's an issue. There is an issue. The Talmud already brings down when it speaks about destruction of the temple. And by destruction of the temple, there were 400 children. 400 children that were held captive and being taken to Rome. Right? They were being taken to Rome. Now, why were they being taken to Rome? We all know that the Romans were not living in Victorian England, right? They were scum of the earth, as we understand. So the children understood they're going to be abused going to Rome. So what did the children do? They all jumped in the water. They all committed suicide. Now, why did they all commit suicide over here? We know suicide is pretty severe, which we spoke about. So why did they commit suicide? Why does the Talmud there not say, oh, look, they committed suicide, they're going to be punished with this and that? Talmud doesn't say anything. Talmud just tells you the story. Right? So many years ago, there's a story of someone I know, or I know of, that this woman had a She had a kidney transplant. She had a kidney transplant, let's say 30 years ago. And 30 years later, the other kidney starts to malfunction. Now, what happens? She has to go on dialysis. Dialysis is very painful, not very much fun. She wasn't a candidate for another kidney transplant. Right? It's already much older. So this woman refuses to go on dialysis. Now, when it comes to science or biology 101 or 101A, right? As far as I understand, if you don't go on dialysis, what's going to happen? Poisons in your body build up, you die.
Yep.
It's a matter of months, if that. So what the person say? I'm not going to live this way, and I'm going to stay at home. I'll take stuff for the pain, and whatever happens, happens. And what happened? 2 months later, they died. So I came to my Rebbe with this question. I said, is that called suicide or not? Now, the Talmud does speak out cases where, let's say, an opportunity to take medicine, and you don't take medicine, life-saving medicine. You don't want to take it. Right? Someone was telling me today, someone in their 60s, and the wife is like a very big anti-vaxxer, and how do you know what's in it, and there's, aborted babies in it, and there's like all these conspiracy theories, right? And, the husband, okay, so husband's sort of going along with it, etc. But, God forbid they, either of them get sick, who knows, what's going to be. So, okay, that they, let's say, for argument's sake, this vaccine is going to save a lot of people, right? It's going to save a lot of people. The person says, I'm not taking it. They can't force me. It's a whole conspiracy and all this and all that. Okay, let's say we agree. Now, what happens? So during whatever time period, one of them or both of them, they get this virus. Now, what happens? They're older, a little more susceptible. They die. Let's say they die because they refuse to take the precaution. Now, if they refuse to take the precaution.
Oh, I lost your voice, Rabbi.
You lost my voice.
Uh-oh. No, I got you now. You got your back.
Okay. So the issue is that they don't take the medicine. Is not taking the medicine, is that called suicide? Right? Do we hold that that's called suicide? Now, you're going to say, well, if it was up to Mr. Kevorkian, he's just going to put something in the bag. You're going to die and do it. That's direct. that 100% is direct. If I don't do anything, I don't take the medication, the person dies, that's indirect, right? If it's indirect, what does that mean? It means I didn't do anything wrong over here, right? Technically speaking, I don't want to take the medicine. I didn't want to go on dialysis. Could this person live 4, 5, 10 years potentially on dialysis? 100%.
They could have lived much quality of life, though, right?
They could have lived much longer. They don't want to go through the pain, right? If they don't want to go through the pain, who says they have to go through it? So I asked my Rebbe this question, and it's like, you have trouble sleeping at night? I'm like, no, but I just want an answer to this question, right? So he explained to me that the Talmud over there talks about the 400 kids jumping in the water. He says, Talmud over there doesn't say it's suicide, right? So that, in other words, they didn't want to get abused. If they didn't want to get abused, one of the commentaries says that's why they did it. And he says that's how we hold according to Jewish law. That's not called suicide, right? So I asked him, okay, very good, but this is not a halachic question. The Rambam does not say anything over here. The code of Jewish law does not say anything over here, right? So when I asked him that, and I said, this is what we call a gadata, right? This is called a homiletic interpretation over here. Normally, Jewish law is not based on homiletic interpretation. So Rebbe then said, that's how we hold. According to Jewish law, that's 100% how we hold. So I said, okay.
That's clear. That's very clear. Thank you.
So that's clear. So in this case, they don't want to take the medication, right? They don't want to go through dialysis. They don't want to go through the pain. So we don't hold that suicide. They are withholding from themselves the ability to be healed. If they choose not to be healed, they're not doing something direct, right? But you tell me someone in such a situation, if we had 100 people in that same situation, 100 people in that same situation, 100%, they are all going to die, right? They are all going to die. 100 out of 100. You don't go on dialysis, you will die. That is what's going to happen. So even if I know that, and a person still says, even so, I'm not going to go through dialysis, what's the bottom line? Bottom line is we don't call it murder, because you're not doing something direct. If you're doing something where, like Mr. Kevorkian, he's putting something in and then you push the button, that's murder, right? That 100% is murder because you're doing the action, right? If it's being done to you against your will, that's something else, right? If you're not doing something to fight it, again, also something else. Now, someone, so that pretty much answers, about suicide, but the question, because I brought up about abortion, right? The question here, if a mother prefers to give birth even though it's putting her life in danger, right? So there's difference of opinion between, the way the Catholics think and the way we think, right? What do the Catholics say? The Catholics say if the fetus is causing, if there's a danger to the mother, right? What the fetus is what we call in halachic literature, we call a rodef, someone who's a pursuer. Someone who's a pursuer, you can knock them out to stop them, right? It doesn't necessarily mean I have to kill them, but if you have no other choice, that's what you do. So the Catholic Church says, if it's a choice between the mother and the child's causing danger to the mother, you let the mother die, you save the child. I was asked this question many years ago by a non-Jew, even before, I got involved in conversion and all that. And they said, why is that? Why does the church say you let the mother die? So the simple answer is you go after potential right now. Potential right now is the mother's going to live in general, right? The child may live, may die. You don't know, right? It's a major doubt over here. That's the way the Catholic Church looks at it. How does Judaism look at it? How does oral law? How do the rabbis look at it? So they say if it's a pursuer, you're putting the mother's life in danger, then we go after, sorry, I said it backwards. By the Catholic Church, You kill the mother, save the child. You go after future potential, right? I said it backwards. So by the Catholic Church, you kill the mother, you save the child. That's future potential. By Judaism, we say you save the mother and kill the child if that's what it takes in order to save the mother, because we go after potential right now. Now, what happens? What happens if the mother says, mother's at risk, tremendous risk, and the mother says, I still want to go through with it, whatever happens, happens. Right? Now, what happens if she gets weaker and weaker? There was a case that my Rebbe spoke about one.
Yeah.
Woman had cancer, and she was clearly dying, and she was expecting, and she wanted to save the child, do whatever they could to save the child. In the end, the mother died and the child died. I think both died, in the end. But the longer they kept the mother alive, the harder it was for the child. Right? So we should never have such questions, in general. But again, we have to know how to look at it. So Judaism is going to look at it as future, as what the potential is now, right? Not future potential. What happens if the mother says, I still want to go through with it, and it ends up costing their lives? Yeah, that's a good question. Could be she'll be liable, right? Could be because she's not going according to what the Torah says. She's going according to emotion, right? And emotion over here should have no say, right? It really should have no say, because in the end she could die.
I like that.
And
Makes sense to me.
And if she puts her life, if she puts the child's life ahead of their own, and they end up dying, that is not the right thing to do. Again, forget about emotion. I'm not talking about emotion, right? The right thing to do is she has to fight for her own life. She's not allowed to say, well, the child's life should take precedent. That's not true, right? Our lives take precedent over here. The woman's life is going to take precedent, over here. And therefore, the child can die, and you can do whatever you want to the child to save the mother's life, right? And that's just the opposite of what we say. What we say that, by the Catholics, which we don't really care either way. But I just want to point out there is a major
sides of a debate.
Someone here brings out also about medicine, and side effects, and all that. Someone take medication, that for sure, that there are side effects. I mean, people on, let's say heart medication, right? They're on, blood pressure medication or other types of medication. I know someone told me a while back they're on a certain medication, and there are about 20 things that could happen by being on this medication, but they have no choice. They have to be on the medication.
Yep. Yeah. And some of the contraindications are horrible.
Stomach this, all these different things, right? All these different things.
You may sprout horns.
Whatever we take, nothing's foolproof, right? There are side effects. There are definite side effects. Now, should a person in general, right? I don't want to get too far in this topic. It's certainly not my area of expertise, right? But we'll just throw out there, if a person, takes certain medication, and that medication has a number of side effects, right? Now, if you have to take the medication, you live with the side effects, right? If a person, let's say, a good example is cancer. A person has cancer, most likely they'll go through chemotherapy. Chemotherapy has horrific side effects, right? Hair loss, nausea, and it doesn't necessarily do the job like it should. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Depends where it is. Depends on a lot of different things.
Kills the host.
Right. It depends what the body can take. I mean, the body gets racked by going through this, right? But the question is, okay, are there any alternatives, right? People don't want to necessarily go through chemotherapy. Are there any, there are natural alternatives, this, that. Let's say, for argument's sake, they have no choice, right? They do want to try and save themselves, as much as they can. So they end up going through chemotherapy. Now, chemotherapy can do all kinds of things. It can have a lot of negative effects, but it can also shrink tumors, right? It can also pretty much, in a nutshell, depending where it is, can make it disappear or not, right? Now, the question would be, again, no one should have to go through this, but the question would be, are the side effects worth it? And I would ask you the following question. Do you want to live or die? If you take the now, if it's a choice, let's say, if you take the chemotherapy, it may work, it may not, but this thing is terminal, you're never going to beat it. So the question is, how do you want to live the rest of your life? Do you want to go through the pain and see what happens? Or you just want to be, have the pain taken away, be on morphine, so the pain won't affect you, but, for sure you're going to die, right? Again, these are questions no one should have to go through. But in the end, a person can make that decision. They have the right to make that decision. There is no obligation. Let's state clear. There is no obligation to keep a person's life going in pain. They don't have to do that, right? If they don't want to. You tell me it's gonna, they're certainly gonna die. But again, look at the case of a person on dialysis. Could have saved them 20 years, 15 years. And they said, I'm not going through it. And they died in 2 months. Yeah.
Well, Rabbi, I'm in a weird scenario, and I had to do some more tests. They wanted to do some more scans, MRIs, and whatnot.
Right.
I'm just too big for the dang machine. I just can't fit. You're gonna have to come up with something. My head doesn't, and I'm like, you know what?
Because you feel
Forget
like a
it,
linebacker.
Right?
That's the problem. You
I'm
feel
sorry?
like a linebacker.
But I can laugh at it, but I ask myself, what should I be doing? Am I lengthening a potential threat? I don't know. The doctor's not telling. Doctors don't love to. They nowadays, especially here in the West, they don't want to say a word unless they have 100% certainty.
No, but you have to get it clarified. You have to see what it is in some way. If they can, that's putting your best foot forward. I mean, if it's something where it is serious, and then you waited too long to get to it, and now, God forbid, it's something inoperable and whatever, then, you should have been a lot more careful. You definitely should have been a lot more, a lot more careful. Listen, we have an obligation to listen to doctors. I don't think there's any question, right? No one's going to sit there and starve themselves. I mean, I get this a lot also. People are going to say, I'm going to fast, I'm going to pray, and God's going to answer me. That's not really a Jewish concept, right? The Jewish concept is, we rely on God 100%, right? But no one is on that level. They don't go to doctors. No one is on that level. We don't put our best foot forward. Nobody, right? Even the greatest rabbis today go to doctors. So at the end of the day, you're right. You got to have faith in God, 100%, right? But you got to see what the doctors say also. So therefore, I got to put my best foot forward. If you don't put your best foot forward, then, that's irresponsible. But not only that, if a person would, everything they do, they say, I'm not going to work. I'm not going to put my best foot forward to bring in money. God's going to take care of my needs. And a person really sits and learns and does what they're supposed to do. Okay, they're on a certain level. Are most people going to be holding there? No. Right? Most people have to put their best foot forward. And if you don't put your best foot forward, you're starving. Even if a person's learning all day, who says that's what you're supposed to be doing? Right? Nobody's at that level. Right? Nobody's on that level. If a person gets sick, no offense, you're not going to God first. You are going to pray, make sure everything's okay. You're going to go to a doctor. Your head hurts, your foot hurts, something else hurts. You're going to a doctor first. You're not going to a rabbi first. Right? Unless it's something where, it could be this, could be that, could be the other thing. You ask a rabbi, okay, what should I do? It's one thing. Right? But we're not necessarily asking a rabbi, do I have to go to the doctor or not? A person has a fever for a number of days, not going away. You're taking Advil, you're taking other things, it's not going away. You got to go see a doctor. Right? I'm not saying prayer can't help over here. Yeah, we're not relying on prayer over here. Right? You have to pray as well. Right? I just been hearing a number of great classes from a Brevda of blessed memory speaking about Purim. And, what was the main thing, that the Jews did, to get saved? They weren't looking around for blessings from great rabbis. They fasted. They prayed for 3 days straight. That's what they did because, when the Jewish people are in danger, you pray 100%. And when you're not in danger, you also pray. So you say, well, when it comes to medicine, I should also pray first. I'm not going to say not. Right. But maybe if a person prays, maybe God will get rid of it. Maybe, right? Maybe it'll just disappear 100%. Right? But, if a person's sick and they have chest pains, they have stomach pains, and after a few days, they take this, they take that, try some other things, and it doesn't subside, prayer can help. I'm not saying not. You go see a doctor, right? We're not Scientologists over here, right? You go see a doctor. That's what you got to do, right? That's the obligation. That is the responsible thing to do. When a person says, yeah, I'm going to rely on God, you better rely on God for every last thing that you do, right? Meaning that I don't do anything. I don't work. I don't worry about food. I don't worry about bills. God's going to provide. God takes care of me. Fine. If you do that with everything, you rely on God, then you don't have to go to doctors. Then 100% you don't have to go to doctors. And the Vilna Gaon said this exact same thing to his brother when he didn't want to go to a doctor when he was sick. And he told him exactly that. He said, if you never went to the doctor, it's one thing. But if you already went to the doctor, you rely on doctors, you put your best foot forward, you got to go see the doctor, right? You can't rely on miracles. We don't rely on miracles today. Yeah, question.
Oh, I was thinking about in the Jehovah Witnesses here in North America.
Yeah.
Their refusal of blood from a misunderstanding of the Torah principle that we're not to eat the limb of a living animal, by misunderstanding that completely, and saying, the life of the flesh is in the blood, and da 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 da, and therefore, so they refuse a transfusion. They literally would rather somebody pass away than take a transfusion. And I mean, that definitively seems to defy all logic, and they're doing it, and they believe they're doing it in the name of.
So I'll tell you that the Talmud says clear, and we mentioned this many times, and that is, if I go in the right direction, God will help me. If I go in the wrong direction, then God's not going to stop me. Right? So if a person wants to be misguided, Jew or non-Jew, right, and want to, believe in Scientology, they want to, be Jehovah's Witnesses or whatever, and go through that, and they watch somebody pass away because they won't go to a doctor, that's not smart. That's totally not smart, right? I'm not saying you don't pray ahead of time. You certainly do that, but, that's kind of silly. If you think about it, God does not want people to die before their time. If a person does, okay, that was their time to go. It's not like the movie, Warren Beatty, Heaven Can Wait. If you remember the movie, and he goes, and seemingly goes before his time. That doesn't exist. That whole idea does not exist in Torah, right? You go when God takes you. Could you do something stupid in the process? Yes. At the end of the day, how come a person doesn't get saved? Why doesn't God save them? Right? And the answer is because that person had no merit left. Because that person had no merit left, i.e., didn't have Torah to guard him, to guard him from any of these bad things happening. So God took him. So that's exactly what happened to this football player. Same thing. He had no merit. If he had no merit to protect himself, then he drowned. If he would have had some merit to protect himself, then quite possibly he wouldn't have drowned, right? But he didn't. And since he didn't, we're not saying he died ahead of his time. He didn't. He died exactly when God wanted to take him. And he just used this as the way to do it, right? And he was liable. But there are other factors that can stop that, right? We mentioned Torah does protect. It can protect. A person can, let's say, a person gets saved from something, person can use up a lot of mitzvahs in order to save them, right? Let's say they use up 50,000 mitzvahs. It's like they lose a life over here. They lose a life over here, but God saved them, right? So now they have to recharge the batteries, get more mitzvahs over here. But if they don't have that divine protection, in this case, what's going to happen? They'll die. 100%, they are going to die. So, it doesn't mean that a person died before the time. This is what we're supposed to be. It's just God used it as a mechanism in order to take them, which, again, to us doesn't necessarily make logical sense. Right? Person dies young, this 3-year-old jumps, falls into a pothole and dies. right? So something else going on with their soul, what they have to go through, and then whatever it was, they fixed it up by dying very young, whatever the case is. Okay, that was their time. The way the mechanics happened, it doesn't really matter. I asked once my Rebbe's son, someone had passed away, and I asked him. I said, so what they have? What happened? He goes, what do you care what happened? They died. It was their time to go. God took them. That's the right mentality, right? Sometimes I have to get slapped upside the head to see the reality. That's the reality. That's the reality we have to see. Yeah, sometimes it's more tragic. Sometimes it's less tragic, etc. But at the end of the day, at the end of the day, God takes who He wants to take, right? Whether they're 97 years old or they're 37 years old, right? As my Rebbe would say, people die young and old because if they all died the same age, no one would repent, right? Think about that. There are a lot of things that happen around us that are tragic, absolutely tragic. I can't even tell you how many women are on a list to pray for that are pregnant and intubated because of COVID. I mean, it's horrific. It's absolutely horrific. Young mothers, and there's not a shortage of things to pray for. Of people to pray for. Why do these things happen? We don't have an answer, right? Most people are dying over the age of 60. Those are the majority of people, even if the statistics are fudged, right? And not all dying of COVID, doesn't really matter. People more susceptible are going to get it. But God also, showed that He can take younger people also. Someone in Muncie, 3, 4 kids, many, many months ago, 37 years old, no health issues, dropped dead in 2 days. 2 days, right? No health issues before. It just, the parasite came in, sucked them dry, and that was it. So what's God saying over here? Whoever He wants to take, He's going to take. You're healthy. You're not healthy. You're young.
He knows all our
you're
days.
Older. You're susceptible. You're not susceptible. Doesn't matter, right? 100%, it doesn't matter. But we have to live with this mentality, right? And what people see is, it's tragic. You're right. It's 100% tragic. There's no question. But at the end of the day, do we say, too bad for them? We go on with life. See, this is the problem. All these people died, in the Jewish community, right? A lot of people, right? New York and New Jersey, other places, at the very beginning died left and right. Not to mention great rabbis that have died. We had 3 died in a week and a half ago, right? So the question is that, are we waking up over here? Or do we say, well, most people have died, now we have the vaccine, and now no one's wearing masks? Does that make any sense? Doesn't make any sense, right? They say, it's not going to affect us, we've got the vaccine, most people vaccinated here, okay. Now they're saying there's a new strain that the vaccine doesn't necessarily help, maybe. Or they're saying, they're also saying that, the vast majority that people have got it right now, 35%, 40% have got both shots. Here in Israel, it's down now 93%. People getting infected, whatever. So it shows. It's a deterrent, but it's not the only thing. It's not the only thing. You hold a mask, you don't hold a mask. We've spoken about, but for goodness sakes, you're protecting someone else, right? 70% is you're protecting someone else. So until we get the green light, and go back to herd immunity and all that, it's going to take a while. Right, here in Israel, it might be quicker, but everywhere else, it's going to take a while. You can't let up your guard over here, but it's not just about that. What it's about is I get the message. Did I get the message? When I see tragedy, the Rambam says, if I don't internalize the message, the beginning of the laws of fasting, he says, if you see a tragedy, it doesn't move you, you're cruel, right? Because if you say, like Amalek, right, getting back to Amalek, you say, this is a chance happening, then you got a problem. You got an absolute problem. Because what are most people going to say? It's like, a 3-year-old falls in a manhole, and then a man falls in, and now he's in a coma. Where's the justice? Right? Where's the justice over here? Like, you understand how God works? You understand how the world works? It's tragic. No one's not going to say it's not tragic. If for whatever reason they're sold now, okay, God took it for whatever reason, which we don't fathom, which we don't understand, right? But in the bigger picture, we have to say, okay, this happened over here. These things don't happen because we're righteous. These things don't happen because we're all doing the right thing. These things happen because of sin at one level or another, right? That, you know, like we mentioned, to have 3 great righteous people taken in 1 week, that is pretty significant. To have one
Huge.
righteous person taken is pretty significant. But with all the Jews have been taken because of this virus, why isn't anyone waking up? Why? Change something in your life. See that God is knocking on the door. It's not a chance happening. You know, this thing is probably biologically made, right? The whole conspiracy, who knows? You know, but it should never have spread the way it did. But what did God say? Shut down everything, right? And people going out of their minds. You know, someone said, oh, thank God for Netflix. You know, people were so desperate, they were watching Korean baseball, roller derby. That's how desperate people were for sports, right? But God shut down every last thing to show you, I don't want it. I want you to wake up and stop following this stupidity. That's what he's telling you. I want you to be introspective in that you should never, ever take life for granted. You shouldn't take breathing for granted, because it could be people just can't breathe, right? That get this thing and it sucks out their lungs, right? But we're all inconvenienced because we hate wearing masks. We're all convenienced because we're stuck inside, right? In Purim, you can only have, you know, members of your family. Can't invite anyone else. Well, hopefully it's going to be the last time, and hopefully Passover, there are 5 intermediate days. You can see family, friends. Let's hope by that time things will go back to normal, somewhat, or not, right? But all we do is complain, but we're not getting the message. People are dying. We're still not getting the message, right? Oh, it's only going to happen to people 60 or over. I'm not 60 yet. I'm pretty healthy, right? Or, you know, someone will say they're pretty healthy. Don't open your mouth to the Satan. Do not open your mouth to Mr. S. Person's going to say, see, it happened to someone older. You know, they had health issues. You know, thank God, went to the doctor. Everything's good. Things can happen overnight, right? Someone told me a story a couple years ago. It was a few years ago. Someone told me the story, and I'll wind down over here because I know you're going to cut me off. And that is that someone told the story, someone, whatever, I guess in their 70s, late 60s, early 70s, they went to see the doctor. And, you know, took all the tests. Everything was good. You know, good bill of health. And about 2 weeks later, a month later, massive stroke, and died a few months later. All right, let's analyze that. They went to the doctor. All the levels were good. You know, heart was good. Everything is good, you know, so to speak. You know, a month later, massive stroke, massive heart attack, you know, and that was it. And they were done. So, yeah, we went to the doctor. We're feeling pretty good. You know, all things being equal, trying to be careful. Is that a guarantee for tomorrow? No guarantee. There's no guarantee, right? But with all this, God's knocking on the door, and he says, are you getting the message? Right? Are you getting the message? And if we're not getting the message, now, as my Rebbe would say, and he said this many, many times over the last number of months, he said, if we don't get the message, we don't internalize the message, then God forbid, God could say, listen, I brought this whole pandemic. I brought this whole thing. You guys didn't get the message. Most people did not wake up over here. So what could God do? He can bring something back in vengeance. He can make things
Even
10
worse,
times
yeah.
worse. He can make it 10 times worse. He says, we don't want that. It's bad
Heaven
enough
forbid.
as it is. But he says, what's it going to take to get the message? And people are making all kinds of excuses. Nah, most people aren't dying. You know, even if a person had COVID, they're not dying from it. They're fudging the statistics. Okay, let's say they are. Let's say they're 20% higher. So instead of 1.5 million people dying, they're only 1 million. Wow. Do you feel better? You know, are you going to sleep better at night knowing this? You know, so even if they are fudged, right? I'm not going to disagree. I think they are, right? You know, even if you want to tell me, let's say it's a 40% difference, still 600,000-700,000 people die. You know, businesses shut down. People in financial state.
I don't know. There's some overreaction
even
there, too.
Even with all that, look at the bigger picture, what's happened. Economies collapsed. People in lockdown. People can't go to work. People getting sick. People not being able to see family. There's a lot of things going on. And what do we do in our puny minds? I can watch Netflix. I can find roller derby.
The Zoom boom.
I can do things. You know, I can watch Julia Childs. I don't even know if she's still alive. I can watch cooking shows. That's what I can do. God's going to say, that's the best you can come up with? I brought the whole world to its knees. And you're worried about a cooking show? You're worried about the CFL? Come on. Come on, that's where we're holding.
I haven't saw a CFL game in a long time.
Thank God. I see my screaming has had a good effect, at least on one person in Canada.
Yeah.
Thank God for that. Right? So my parting message is, because I see we got totally off topic here, but that's okay because that's what we do. Right? But in the bigger scheme of things, the world depends on us. Right? The Talmud says clear. The Mishnah in Sanhedrin says that Bishvili Nivra Olam. For me, the world is created. Each person's their own world, right? So, no pun intended, for me, not for you, right? For me, not for anybody else. So the world revolves around me. Comes on the Rambam. The Rambam says in the laws of repentance, every city, every town, every state, every continent is on a scale, right? The scale is going up and down. And he says, my action right now, up and down for good or bad, right? Good, bad, right? My action right now, whatever I do right now, can either go to the side of good or the side of bad. So basically what I do matters. What I think matters, right? So the Rambam says, okay, that's our obligation. And if a certain place gets hit, they deserve it because the equilibrium is on the wrong side, right? The equilibrium is down on the wrong side. They're going to say, okay, I have the ability, forget about what anyone else does. I have the ability to do the right thing. If I do the wrong thing, scale goes down. I do the wrong thing again, the scale goes down. I have to worry about me, right? But how come we don't live our lives like this? How come we don't see the scale in front of our eyes? What's the simple explanation? Simple explanation is because we don't live life the way we should. We don't look at the bigger picture. If we looked at the bigger picture, you never get out from under the covers. That's really the bottom line.
Exactly.
We wouldn't, because life is too scary. Because what I do matters in so many different ways. Physically, spiritually, in all the spiritual worlds. We're not even going to get into that because you're going to cut me off in 2 minutes. So, with all that.
It's coming fast. No.
I know it's coming fast. So, with all that, we have to get the message. Yeah. We absolutely have to internalize the message that what I do matters, what I think matters, and I have an obligation to protect others. And I have to be able to internalize over here what in the world is going on instead of complaining. And that's what we do, right? All we do is complain left and right. Can't have this, can't do that, can't get together with this one. Yeah, okay, it's gone on for a long time. I get it. The grandparents haven't seen the grandkids for a long time. You can always see them, through Zoom or being outside, and it's freezing out in most places and all that. That's all true. And people going out of their minds. That's true. And psychologically, it's unhealthy not to be around people and all that. That I agree. I agree. But don't things happen in the world because we don't do the right thing? Isn't that really the message? So instead of complaining about what we're doing, what I would say to everybody is, you go out and do the right thing to the best of your ability. That's what's going to change the world. Right? That's right. What is absolutely going to change the world. Forget about getting beaten down in life. Forget about what life throws at you. I still have to get up and pray. I still have to keep the mitzvahs. I still have to do whatever I have to do. Let God do what he has to do, but I have to get the message. Because if I don't get the message, we are, in my language, toast. Right? We are going to be toast. It's going to be 10 times worse.
Rabbi, I've heard the Rambam say that you need to learn to do what's right because it's right. Whereas today, everybody wants to do right if there's something in it for them, and that's still incorrect. I mean, it's better than doing it for the wrong reason.
We spoke about it way back when. The highest level is to serve God, even if you're not going to get any reward.
Right.
Doing it right means God said it's right. Right.
And that's
so
what
therefore,
Torah
I'm going to
is.
do it because the Torah is true. That's it. Right. That's the only reason. I'm going to get reward. I'm not going to get reward. Irrelevant. Right. It's absolutely irrelevant. There's a higher level. There's a lower level. Person has to come to that realization, and the realization that God runs the world and God's in charge. That is the message.
Wow. I think that's a lot for people to chew on for today, Rabbi. Are we okay to shut it down? Because I got to get ready for my next class. But I mean, you're on a roll, sir. You're on a roll. Great class today. I really enjoyed it. I think you could go for another hour, maybe 2. Maybe we could even bring back the bunnies.
Listen,
I don't know, Rabbi.
I probably could go for another 2 hours. And guess what? I haven't had any caffeine. Right? So imagine if I would have had caffeine. right? So, next week I might be speaking a little bit slower after Purim, right? Purim will already be over, but I should be in one piece by the time it takes to give this class. So probably have a lot to speak about Purim next week.
Well,
If there's
folks,
anything
there you
left
go.
in
I
this
just
class.
want you to know, folks, that Rabbi Coffman's willing to do a class next week, even though there's Purim. So we'll definitely still be doing this broadcast, Hashem willing, of course. But I know that a couple of other rabbis won't be able to broadcast due to
Start by
Purim.
singing the most famous song that everybody knows. And the famous song that everybody knows is Plop, Plop, Fizz, Fizz.
Alka-Seltzer, yeah. Oh, what a relief it is.
You have to know how to drink. And, thank God I always know how to drink. So, that shouldn't be a problem as long as I drink enough water afterwards. And we definitely, Friday is Purim. So I got a whole day. I got all of Shabbos to
Well,
get all
we
my
hope you're filled with joy.
So to speak, back together if there's anything left of me. But we definitely should be good for next week.
Hashem willing. Well, Rabbi, you filled us with joy today, and you're always shining the light of Torah out of Israel, and we so thank you for this series, this class. Pirkei Avos, the ethics of the fathers with Rabbi Chaim Coffman. We're going to sign off for now, but till next week, he's willing to go next week, so I hope you all come back. It's been nice to meet some new people out there, people from Poland, people from all over. I see we got our friend Nina down in South America, many, many people all over the world. It's great to be together and to hear Torah shine out of the nation of Israel. So till next week, folks, have a wonderful, wonderful week.